One of the most deceptive and dangerous traits in a person who harbors dark intentions is their ability to appear kind, almost saint-like. It's not just fake smiles and surface-level politeness, it's strategic. It's calculated, and it works because we're conditioned, often from childhood, to trust kindness. We want to believe that people who extend generosity and compassion are good, that if someone does something nice for us, they must care. But what happens when that kindness has strings attached? What if that seemingly warm gesture is a trap? This kind of person doesn't show their cruelty through rage or obvious betrayal. Instead, they use kindness as a form of psychological currency. They give not because they want to give, but because they want to own. And they'll keep a record, sometimes mentally, sometimes even literally, of every good thing they've done for you. That cup of coffee they bought. That favor they did for you 2 months ago. The advice they gave you when you were vulnerable. It's all part of their mental ledger, and they're keeping score. You may not realize it yet, but the moment you try to assert yourself or push back against something they say or do, you'll find yourself drowning in a guilt trip masked as emotional logic. After everything I've done for you. This is where the trap is fully set. Because now, your sense of independence and your ability to question them are both compromised. They've created a debt, one you never asked for, but one they expect you to repay through obedience, loyalty, or silence. You begin to feel like challenging them is wrong, not because it actually is, but because they've distorted the emotional landscape to make their kindness look like moral authority. And the worst part, everyone else sees them as a great person. They're so nice. People say they'd give you the shirt off their back, and maybe they would, but they'd want you to wear it in public and say where you got it. They'd want recognition, appreciation, and most dangerously, control. Because the kindness wasn't free, it never was. That's the subtlety of it. Real kindness is free. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't manipulate or control. It uplifts, it liberates, but when kindness becomes a tactic, when it becomes a tool to bind someone in guilt or dependency, it's no longer kindness. It's domination dressed in compassion. You start noticing it in patterns. They always give at moments when you're weak, when you're exposed. After a breakup, a job loss, or an emotional breakdown. They offer their support, and it feels like salvation at the time. But later, when you try to set a boundary, they remind you of what they did. It's not explicit, it's not overt, it's subtle. A quick comment, a disappointed look, a sentence like, "Wow, I didn't expect this from you, especially after how much I've been there for you." And just like that, you're on the defensive. You're explaining yourself, apologizing, compromising. That's the power of weaponized kindness. It flips your instincts against you. The part of you that's loyal, empathetic, and fair becomes the very mechanism they use to manipulate you. And you don't realize it's happening because it's not loud, it's quiet, it's covered in sugar, but it's still poison. And when you finally begin to pull away, when you start to see the manipulation for what it is, they'll escalate. They'll either double down with more guilt or pivot into victimhood. They'll act hurt, betrayed, confused. "I was just trying to help. I can't believe you'd think that about me. And now you're the villain. You're the ungrateful one, the cold one, and if you're not grounded in reality, if you're not clear about your boundaries, they'll pull you right back in, not with rage, not with force, but with more carefully crafted kindness." That's why it's essential to discern the motive behind the gesture. Ask yourself, is this person giving because they care, or because they want to control the narrative? Are they supporting me to build me up, or to own a piece of me later? Do I feel freer or more indebted after they help me? Your emotional response is the clue. Real kindness feels like empowerment. Manipulative kindness feels like pressure. And if you ignore that pressure long enough, you'll end up trapped in a dynamic where every thank you becomes a link in your own chain, until one day you realize you're not being loved. You're being managed, and that's not kindness. That's evil in disguise. The most dangerous liar is not the one who tells blatant, obvious lies. It's the one who wraps their deception in just enough truth to make it believable. They don't outright fabricate reality. They bend it, twist it, shape it just enough to keep you off balance, to keep you questioning your own judgment. These people don't operate in black and white. They exist in the gray zone where manipulation thrives because it's hard to pin down, hard to name, hard to prove, and that's exactly how they want it. They'll tell you part of the story, the part that paints them as the victim, or the hero, or the misunderstood one, the part that wins sympathy, but they'll conveniently leave out what they said before the argument, the text they sent that sparked the drama, the cruel thing they did that provoked the fallout. They'll leave gaps, strategic absences in the narrative that force you to fill in the blanks with assumptions that benefit them, and you'll do it because it sounds true. Because technically they didn't lie, they just didn't tell the whole truth, and that's how they win. Half-truths are insidious because they erode your sense of reality slowly, not all at once, but inch by inch. You start out confident in what you saw, what you felt, what you heard, but then they speak with such certainty, such conviction, that you begin to doubt yourself. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they're right. Maybe I overreacted. That's how it starts, the quiet internal compromise, and once they see that seed of self, doubt in you, they nurture it, water it, they make you second, guess your instincts, your memory, even your values. This tactic is especially effective because it doesn't trigger your defenses immediately. If someone lies to your face, your instincts kick in. You sense something's wrong. But when someone mixes truth and lies together, when they deliver just enough honesty to make the fiction plausible, it slips past your radar. You feel something's off, but you can't explain it. And if you try to confront them, they always have a way out. They'll say you're twisting their words, that you're projecting, that you're being paranoid, and suddenly the conversation isn't about their actions anymore, it's about your reaction. They redirect the spotlight until you're the one on trial. And they're skilled at telling the version of the truth that makes them look good, even when they're the problem. They'll describe the fight without mentioning their cruelty. They'll admit to raising their voice, but claim it was out of passion or defensiveness. They'll tell you about their ex being crazy, but forget to mention the manipulation, the infidelity, the emotional games they played. They edit reality like a scriptwriter, cutting scenes, changing tone, rewriting characters. And the story they tell always makes them look either innocent or justified. They also love to use moral language to cover up immoral actions. They'll say things like, "I was just being honest," after saying something cruel. Or, "I had to protect myself after betraying you." These statements sound reasonable until you realize they're being used to mask harm. They're not interested in truth. They're interested in control. And by controlling the version of events, they control perception. Not just how others see them, but how you see yourself. Over time, if you're close to someone like this, you start to lose confidence in your own narrative. You begin to rely on them to interpret situations for you. You wait for their version of the truth to validate what you felt, and when it doesn't match, you assume you're the one who's wrong. That's the goal, to keep you disoriented, dependent, easy to manage. Because when someone controls the truth, they control the entire relationship. They can shift blame without ever admitting guilt. They can play the victim while being the aggressor. They can appear honest while being deeply dishonest. And here's the cruel irony. They'll often accuse you of lying, of exaggerating, of distorting facts. That's projection. It's part of the game. because as long as you're defending your integrity, you're not questioning theirs. It's a diversion tactic, and it works because you're still trying to play fair in a game they've rigged from the beginning, so you end up confused, you feel guilty, unsure, hesitant, not because you've done anything wrong, but because they've made you doubt your own mind. That's what half-truths do. They don't just distort facts, they destabilize your entire perception of reality, and once you stop trusting your own eyes and ears, you become easy to control. You lose your voice, and they become the narrator of your life. And when someone else is writing your story, you'll always end up the villain in their version. And the prisoner in yours, there's a certain kind of person who thrives on conflict, but not the kind that comes from open confrontation. No, this type prefers a more refined chaos, quiet sabotage, psychological poking. They specialize in triggering emotional reactions and then stepping back, washing their hands and asking, "What did I do?" It's a performance, one where they get to play the innocent bystander while you lose your composure and look like the problem. And it's so subtle, so well rehearsed, that even you start to wonder if you really are the issue. They'll never start the fire in the open. They light the match behind their back and toss it into the room with a smile, a passive, aggressive comment, a veiled insult, a reminder of your past mistake disguised as a joke. It's always just under the threshold of obvious cruelty, just enough to sting, but not enough to prove anything. You feel it immediately, that tight knot in your chest, the sudden drop in your stomach. And then comes the twist. They act like nothing happened. They play it cool, casual, maybe they even laugh. If you confront them, if you dare to say, "Hey, that was uncalled for," they tilt their head and act confused. "What are you talking about? You're overreacting. It was just a joke." And now, instead of holding them accountable, you're explaining your emotions. You're trying to justify your pain to someone who intentionally caused it, and is now pretending they didn't. That's the genius of the provoker. They flip the narrative so fast you don't even realize it's been flipped. 1 second, you were defending yourself. The next, you're apologizing for being too sensitive, and they know exactly what they're doing. This isn't clumsiness, it's calculated. They test your boundaries by pushing little buttons, then watch your reaction, not with concern, but with curiosity. Like an experiment, they want to see how much control they have over your emotional state. Can they make you snap? Can they make you cry, lash out, go silent? That's their reward, not the conflict itself, but the control, the power to move you emotionally without ever looking like the one who threw the first punch. What makes this dynamic especially toxic is how invisible it is to outsiders. To the rest of the world, they're charming, funny, empathetic even. No one sees the subtle jabs. No one hears the way they say your name with just enough condescension to cut. All they see is you reacting, you losing your temper, you storming out or breaking down, and they stay composed, calm, concerned. They play the victim beautifully, and in doing so, they isolate you not just emotionally, but socially. People begin to question your stability. They start wondering if you're too emotional, too dramatic. Meanwhile, the real manipulator walks away clean, and you start doubting yourself. That's the most devastating part. You begin to wonder if maybe you are the problem. Maybe you're too reactive, too fragile. You try to be more tolerant, more understanding. You silence yourself. You absorb the insults, the digs, the constant edge of tension, all in an effort to avoid looking crazy. And the more you pull back, the more power they gain, because now they know they can push you without consequence. They've conditioned you to tolerate pain and apologize for bleeding. This is psychological warfare at its most refined. They break you down not with volume, but with precision, not with shouting, but with quiet cruelty. and then they use your very human reaction as proof that you're unstable, that you're irrational, and if you stay in this dynamic long enough, you'll lose sight of who you were before it began. You'll become the very thing they accused you of being, not because it's who you are, but because they manipulated you into believing it. And the scariest part, they don't need to hate you to do this. They don't even need a reason. Sometimes they do it out of boredom, or out of their own unresolved issues, or simply because they can, because the game is just too tempting, because watching someone unravel while you remain untouched is, to them, the ultimate form of power. So you have to learn to see it, to recognize the pattern, that uneasy feeling you get when someone always seems to provoke and then retreat behind a wall of innocence. That's not a coincidence, that's a strategy. And if you don't call it for what it is, you'll spend your life trying to manage your emotions around someone who's quietly feeding on them. They rarely do it all at once. The ones who truly want to destroy your confidence don't come at you with obvious insults or brutal takedowns. That would be too easy to spot, too easy to call out. No, what they do is quieter, it's subtle, it's slow, it's death by 1,000 cuts, and before you know it, the person you used to be, the one who believed in their own value, their own voice is gone, replaced by someone who doubts every move, every choice, every word. That's what they wanted all along. They start with something small, a comment disguised as concern, a smile hiding the blade. Are you sure you want to wear that? I'm just saying, maybe that's not your strength. You're great, but maybe that dream is a little too big. You brush it off at first. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're just being honest, but that's how it works. They get into your head by pretending to care. They frame their sabotage as support. That's what makes it so insidious. Because if they came out and said, "You're not good enough," you'd walk away. But instead, they say it like they're doing you a favor. Like they're protecting you from failure, and if you push back, they retreat behind that shield. I'm just trying to help. And suddenly, you're the unreasonable one, the ungrateful one, and so you start listening to them a little more, trusting them a little more, doubting yourself a little more. Over time, it becomes a pattern. You begin to notice that every time you express enthusiasm about something, an idea, a project, a dream, they chip away at it. Just a little. They ask questions that sound logical but are really laced with doubt. What if it doesn't work out? Do you really think you're ready for that? And worst of all, people like you usually don't make it that far. People like you. That's the line that lingers. That's the poison. And when something does go wrong, when life throws the inevitable setback your way, they're the first to jump in with, "I told you so." Not always out loud. Sometimes just with a look, a shrug, a sigh. They feed on your disappointment because it confirms their narrative, the one where you need them, the one where you're incapable on your own. They don't want you to grow. Not really. Growth means independence. Growth means you might outgrow them, and so they undermine it at every turn. If you start taking care of yourself, they'll make sarcastic comments about how you've changed. If you start pursuing your goals, they'll accuse you of being selfish or unrealistic. They'll mock your ambition, laugh at your passion, question your progress, not because it's invalid, but because it threatens their control. Because that's what this is really about. Control. When someone sabotages your confidence, they're not just hurting your feelings. They're trying to make you smaller, easier to manage, easier to keep in place. A confident person is hard to manipulate. A confident person draws boundaries, takes risks, speaks up. So their goal is to chip away at that part of you until you hesitate before every decision, until you ask for permission before acting on your own ideas, until you depend on them for validation, and they can withhold it whenever they choose. And even when you succeed, they find a way to minimize it "You just got lucky," "It's not that big of a deal," or worse, "You only did it because I helped you." They'll steal credit for your victories and assign blame for your failures, and over time you start shrinking, not physically but spiritually. Your light dims, your voice gets quieter, you stop dreaming out loud. You stop dreaming at all. You begin to live in a state of quiet hesitation, always second guessing, always wondering if you're good enough, smart enough, capable enough, and that inner voice, the one that used to encourage you, starts to sound like them. Because when someone sabotages your confidence long enough, they don't just live outside your head. They become your internal dialogue. That's how deep it goes. That's the real damage. It's not just what they take from you. It's what they convince you to stop giving to yourself. Your belief, your courage, your permission to try. And once that's gone, they don't even have to hold you back. You'll do it yourself. They don't need to outright forbid you from seeing other people or from pursuing your interests. That would be too obvious, too blatant. Instead, they employ a quieter, more insidious method, one that's harder to notice and even harder to confront. They isolate you not through force, but through suggestion. Through subtle discouragement, the kind of discouragement that feels like concern, but is really just a way to make you question your choices, your desires, your connections, and it works because it's dressed in the cloak of care. At first, it's small, a throwaway comment here, a gentle pushback there. "Are you sure you want to go out tonight? You've been really tired lately." That's great you're hanging out with them, but I've noticed they don't really have your best interests at heart. These statements seem harmless, almost thoughtful. They sound like concern, like someone who's just looking out for you. But over time, the frequency of these comments grows. The care starts to feel more like a constant check on your freedom. And the more you hear them, the more you start second guessing your own decisions. The effect is gradual but undeniable. The first time you cancel plans because you feel guilty, you convince yourself it's just a minor concession. Maybe you are a little tired. Maybe you should be more careful with your time. But the second time it happens, it feels harder. You start to ask yourself, do I really need to go out? Are these friends really who I should be spending my time with? And when you do go out, you begin to feel uncomfortable. A subtle, gnawing discomfort that wasn't there before. They've planted the seed of doubt, and it's taking root. Next, they start isolating you from your support system. They position themselves as the one who understands you best, the one who gets you, while subtly sowing seeds of mistrust or disinterest in others. I don't know. They didn't seem very supportive when you told them about your promotion. I heard what they said about you the other day. I'm not sure they have your back. These aren't direct attacks. They don't outright say your friends are bad people. They just leave enough doubt in your mind for you to question their loyalty, their intentions. And soon, those relationships that once felt solid start to feel shaky. You find yourself withdrawing, not because you want to, but because it's harder and harder to ignore the doubts they've planted. But it doesn't stop there. This person knows that true isolation doesn't happen all at once. It happens when you stop seeking connection because you don't trust your own choices. They've cultivated a kind of emotional codependency where you start relying on their opinion more than your own. You begin to run everything through them, every plan, every decision, every social interaction. You ask for permission, you ask for guidance, and when they give it, you take it, because their version of care has become the barometer by which you measure everything else. And as the isolation grows, so does the subtle discouragement. They'll suggest that you're better off staying in or focusing on more important things. Do you really need to spend time on that hobby? I thought you said you were going to prioritize your career. You could go, but are they really worth your time? Are they pushing you forward? What was once a source of joy, your friends, your hobbies, your interests, now starts to feel trivial or unworthy of your time. They've shifted the focus, redirected your energy. You begin to feel like an outsider in your own life, and worse, you begin to feel like you don't really deserve the things that once made you feel fulfilled. The greatest danger in all of this is the slow, insidious way it works. You don't notice that your social circle is shrinking because it happens one small step at a time, one event missed, one text ignored, one opportunity passed up for the sake of something more important. You don't even see how much you've pulled back until, one day, you find yourself sitting alone, questioning your own choices, wondering why it feels like no one cares about you. Because, by that point, the person who's been subtly discouraging you from connecting with others has convinced you that you're better off with them, that they're all you need, and as you become more isolated, they get more control. You turn to them for validation, for comfort, because there's no one else around to remind you of who you used to be. And slowly, they've woven themselves into your life as the sole source of support, the person you can't imagine living without. And they've done it by slowly dismantling the relationships and activities that once made you whole. This is the heart of the isolator's strategy, to make you believe you can't trust anyone else, to make you feel like you're better off without your friends, your passions, your independence. To make you dependent on them, so that in the end they have all the power and you have nothing left but their approval. They never seem to own their actions, their words, or their mistakes. In their world, nothing is ever their fault. No matter how many times they've crossed a line, no matter how many promises they've broken, no matter how much damage they've caused, they'll never admit it. Instead, they deflect, defame, and deny. They twist reality until it's unrecognizable, and in the end, it's always someone else's problem. Always someone else's fault, and if you're close enough to them, you might start to believe it too. It's not a matter of simple denial, like a child refusing to admit they broke the vase. It's a systematic pattern, one that they've honed over time until it becomes an art form. They'll twist every argument into a reflection of your own behavior, turning every accusation back onto you. I only said that because you were being difficult. You wouldn't have gotten so upset if you weren't so sensitive. They have a way of making it seem like any issue, any conflict, any problem is something you caused, or something you exaggerated, even if it was them who lied, even if it was them who broke the trust. They'll always have a way to make themselves the victim, and they're incredibly skilled at it. They have an answer for everything, a justification for every mistake, a reason why they're not to blame. It's never their fault they missed the appointment because I thought you were going to remind me. It's never their fault the relationship fell apart because you never communicated properly. They always have someone else to point to: the world, the circumstances, other people, but never themselves. They'll play the martyr, the misunderstood hero, the one who's always dealing with the fallout of someone else's actions. It's a performance they've perfected over years, and they're never without their lines. The really insidious part is how convincing they can be. They speak with such certainty, such calmness, that you start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you did cause it. Maybe you are the problem. They spin such elaborate webs of excuses that it becomes hard to see through them. You might even find yourself apologizing, even when you know, deep down, that you weren't in the wrong. Because they've shifted the focus, they've moved the goalposts, and suddenly you're the one on trial, defending yourself against accusations that make no sense. And yet, despite all the deflection, despite all the manipulation, they're never satisfied. Because it's not just about avoiding blame, it's about creating a narrative where they're the only one in the right and everyone else is wrong. They need to be seen as the victim, the one who's constantly under attack, constantly misunderstood. And in their mind, every problem, every disagreement, every failure becomes an opportunity to rewrite the story in their favor. This is the behavior of someone who has no interest in self-improvement, who has no desire to change because admitting fault would require them to face their own flaws. And that they simply cannot do. They cannot bear the thought of looking inward and seeing that they might be the source of the problem. So they continue on their path, leaving a trail of destruction behind them, all while insisting that it's never their fault. And the longer you remain in a relationship with someone like this, the more exhausting it becomes. You begin to question your own reality, your own memory. You begin to wonder if maybe you are overreacting, if maybe you did make it all worse than it really was. The constant shifting of blame makes you second. Guess yourself at every turn until you no longer know what's true and what's not. It's a psychological drain that wears you down until you can't trust your own judgment. And if you push them to take responsibility, if you press them too hard to face the truth, they'll shift tactics. They might give you a half-hearted apology, but it will be hollow, devoid of any real remorse. It will be a sorry, said only to end the conversation, not because they actually feel guilty. Or they might escalate, becoming defensive or even aggressive, turning the tables and making you feel guilty for daring to confront them. The moment you challenge their narrative, you become the enemy. They will vilify you for demanding accountability, for expecting them to own their part in the fallout. The refusal to take responsibility creates a toxic environment. It keeps you stuck in a loop of confusion, doubt, and frustration. You're left holding the bag while they walk away unscathed, never having to face the consequences of their actions. It's a dynamic built on evasion, not growth. A cycle that perpetuates itself until you no longer know who to trust or how to get out. Ultimately, their refusal to take responsibility isn't just about dodging blame, it's about control. Because as long as they can avoid accountability, they hold all the power. They're the ones who define the narrative. They're the ones who dictate the terms of the relationship. And in the end, you're left wondering if you'll ever get the chance to see them for who they truly are, someone who can never, ever own their mistakes. They are experts at reading people, especially those who wear their hearts on their sleeves. They know exactly who to target, the empathetic, the kind-hearted, the ones who always try to help, who can't bear to see someone else suffer, and they use that against you. It's not enough for them to simply take advantage of your good nature. They manipulate it. They turn your desire to help into a tool for their own benefit, draining you of your time, energy, and emotional resources. And they do it in such a way that you feel like the bad person when you even consider pulling away. It starts innocently enough. They seem to be in need, genuinely struggling, and you, with your open heart, offer your support. They may seem vulnerable, hurting, or misunderstood. They present themselves as victims of circumstances, people, or life itself. You feel the urge to step in to make things right for them. After all, you know what it's like to be in pain, to feel lost. You want to offer a listening ear, a helping hand, a safe space. And in the beginning, maybe it feels good to help. It feels like a connection, like you're doing something meaningful. But that's when they begin to push, just a little further each time, testing how much you're willing to give. They learn the soft spots in your soul, the places where your empathy runs deepest. They understand what makes you compassionate, what triggers your desire to protect, to care. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they begin to demand more. At first, it's small things. Could you help me with this, just for today? And you do, because how could you not? They are in need, and you want to help, but then the requests grow. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. Could you take care of this for me? And still, you agree, because you can't stand the thought of them struggling alone. But with every favor, every act of kindness, they take a little bit more. You start to feel like you're constantly giving, and when you express the slightest hint of exhaustion, they know exactly what to say. I don't know what I'd do without you. You're the only one who understands me. They'll lean into your compassion, making you feel irreplaceable, needed, like you're the only person who can save them. They stroke your ego just enough to keep you hooked, reinforcing the idea that you're the hero in their story. And because your empathy compels you to respond to that need, you keep giving, even when it feels like too much. You sacrifice your own well-being to fulfill their demands, and they don't miss a beat. They take and take and take. But the manipulation is in the timing, the way they know when to pull back just enough to make you think things will be different. They will show brief moments of gratitude, of thank you, that make you feel appreciated. For a moment, you think that perhaps this time things are balanced, that they've truly recognized your generosity. But the cycle always starts again. They will ask for more, and when you hesitate, they will guilt, trip you. I thought you cared about me. I thought you wanted to help. And so you give again because you can't bear to be seen as uncaring, selfish, or distant. Eventually, it becomes clear that it's never enough. No matter how much you do, it's never appreciated in a way that makes you feel valued. They take, they exploit, and they move on, leaving you emotionally drained, always wondering if you've done enough. They never reciprocate. They never offer their help or support in return. They've learned how to feed off your empathy without ever giving anything back, creating a one-sided dynamic where you're constantly running on empty, while they thrive off the energy you provide. The damage of this manipulation is subtle but deep. It eats away at your self-esteem, your sense of self-worth. You begin to believe that the only way to be loved, to be appreciated, is to constantly give, constantly sacrifice. And in this way, they distort your sense of boundaries. You forget that it's okay to say no. You forget that your needs are just as important as theirs. You lose sight of your own value because their neediness and dependency become the focus of your world. They might also use your empathy against you in even more toxic ways. When they're not demanding your energy, they will play on your emotions to keep you tied to them. They might put on a display of sadness, of loneliness, of desperation, making you feel like if you pull away, you'll be abandoning them. You don't know how hard it is. No one else is there for me like you are. They might say things that make you feel like you're betraying them by taking care of yourself, by stepping back from the constant cycle of giving. And the worst part is that they know you will feel guilty. They know that you cannot bear to see them struggle because you've been conditioned by your own empathy to care more about others' pain than your own. They exploit this weakness to keep you tethered to them, making sure that even when you want to pull away, you feel like you can't. Because if you do, you might hurt them, you might leave them in their time of need, but the truth is, they never needed you in the way you think they do. They don't need your empathy to grow, to heal, to become stronger. They only need it to keep you in their web of dependency, to keep you giving and giving while they take without ever offering anything of real value in return. And by the time you realize what's happening, your spirit is exhausted, your kindness has been drained, and you're left with nothing but the hollow feeling of being used. They have an uncanny ability to make you question what is right and what is wrong, what is virtuous and what is selfish. They twist the very concept of morality until it becomes nearly unrecognizable, until the lines between good and bad blur, and you're left uncertain about which side you stand on. This is the subtle power they wield, manipulating not just actions, but your fundamental understanding of what is morally acceptable, what should be considered ethical, and what's truly harmful. It doesn't happen all at once. They don't come out and say, "This is how you should view morality." No, they operate in the shadows, planting seeds of doubt and confusion. At first, they might seem to have high moral standards themselves, appearing righteous, principled, even virtuous. They might align with causes that seem noble, express concern for justice, or advocate for the right thing, and because their words sound so right, you begin to trust them. You begin to believe that they, too, value truth, integrity, and fairness. But then, slowly, they start to shift things, one small step at a time. They introduce contradictions into your life. It could be something as small as a casual remark about how the ends justify the means, how sometimes it's okay to cut corners if the greater good is served. At first, this might sound reasonable. After all, we all face situations where compromise seems necessary, but the longer they continue, the more they chip away at your own moral compass. What was once a small concession becomes a larger justification for more questionable action. The framework for what's right and wrong starts to erode, and you're left struggling to distinguish between the two. They might tell you that loyalty is paramount, and that you should protect those who are close to you, no matter what. Sometimes, the people who care about you most will ask for things that others might not understand. You have to be loyal. This, on its own, seems fair. Loyalty is, after all, a virtue. But what they don't mention is that this loyalty comes with a price. You might need to overlook some things. You might have to sacrifice your own morals for the people who need you. What they're really saying is that loyalty should come before everything else, even at the cost of your integrity, your values, or the truth. Over time, this idea starts to seep into your mind, and you begin to believe that loyalty should always be prioritized, even when it leads you to cover up harmful behaviors or justify wrongdoings. They'll appeal to your sense of fairness and justice, all while gently guiding you into situations where fairness no longer applies. They'll make you believe that the world is inherently unfair, and that sometimes, in order to get ahead or protect what's yours, you must do things that go against your values. It's the way the world works. The system is rigged. People in power don't play by the rules. Why should you? They twist the narrative, making it seem like playing by the rules is naive, that being good and honorable is a weakness, and that only the ruthless survive. And soon, you start questioning why you're following the rules at all. What's the point of being honest if the world is filled with deception? Why should you care about fairness when others only take advantage of you? Slowly, they convince you that morality is relative, that what's right depends on the situation, the people involved, or the outcome you're hoping for. And if you challenge them, if you voice discomfort with the way they're framing these ideas, they'll skillfully flip it back on you. They'll accuse you of being naive, of not understanding the complexity of the world. You think everything is so black and white, don't you? They might say, their voice dripping with faux concern. Life is messy. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't lead to the right outcome. Sometimes you have to bend the rules. They make you doubt your own sense of morality, casting you as someone who doesn't understand the real world. You start to wonder, am I too idealistic? Is my sense of right and wrong outdated? But it's not just about convincing you to abandon your principles for their sake. It's about getting you to believe that doing so is not just okay, but necessary. They create a narrative where virtue becomes a vulnerability, and stepping over moral lines is a survival tactic, even a strength. Every time they press you into justifying questionable behavior, they reinforce the idea that morality is just a social construct, something flexible and negotiable, not a set of universal truths. In their world, the moral high ground is for the weak, the gullible, the unworldly. And as time passes, the shifts become more pronounced. They convince you that you can justify doing things that you once would have considered unacceptable. Lying becomes okay if it protects someone you care about. Manipulating the truth becomes acceptable if it ensures your success. Breaking a promise is forgivable if it serves your interests. They redefine what's ethical to fit their agenda, and you, having been slowly conditioned, begin to accept it. You find yourself questioning not only your own actions, but the very foundations of right and wrong. What's worse is that they will never acknowledge the harm they've done. They won't see it as a betrayal or a manipulation. They'll see it as necessary, practical, or even justifiable. In their eyes, the world is a chessboard, and they're simply playing the game. They'll never admit that their actions have hurt anyone. Instead, they'll continue to make you believe that this is just how things are. That morality is just a tool to be wielded, not a principle to live by. By the time you realize what's happening, the damage is done. Your sense of right and wrong has been fractured. You no longer know where the boundaries are, or even if they should exist at all. They've succeeded in inverting your morality, making you question everything you once held dear, all for the sake of their own agenda. As we navigate through life, we must be vigilant, not just of the actions of others, but of the subtle ways in which our values and principles can be eroded. The people who seek to manipulate, control, and exploit often don't come at us with force. They come in the guise of kindness, understanding, and even friendship. They prey on our empathy, our sense of fairness, and our willingness to believe the best in others. But we cannot afford to be blinded by their tactics. We must remember that true integrity is not flexible, and our values should never be negotiable.